The evening air hung thick with unspoken tension, the kind that presses against your skin like humid summer nights. I stood at the kitchen counter, my hands mechanically washing dishes while my mind wandered through the maze of thoughts that had occupied me all week. The amber glow from the overhead light cast long shadows across the marble countertop, and somewhere in the distance, a clock ticked its steady rhythm. That's when I felt his presence. Marcus stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim hallway light. He wasn't my blood, wasn't my family, just the young man who'd rented the spare room 6 months ago after responding to my carefully worded ad. 23, ambitious, working his way through graduate school. Everything about our arrangement had been professional, boundaries clearly drawn. Until tonight, the way he watched me made my breath catch. Not the casual glance of someone passing through the kitchen, but something deeper, more deliberate. His dark eyes held mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine, and I found myself gripping the dish towel tighter, the damp fabric cool against my suddenly warm palms. "Grace," he said, my name floating across the space between us like smoke. Just that, my name, but the way he said it made my heart stumble. I turned back to the dishes, trying to regain my composure, but I could feel him moving closer, each footstep deliberate on the hardwood floor. The faucet water ran cold over my hands, but my skin felt feverish. Why was the kitchen suddenly so small? Why could I hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears? I'd been alone too long, I told myself. 5 years since David had left, 5 years of quiet evenings and empty spaces. That's all this was, loneliness playing tricks on my mind. But when Marcus stopped beside me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woody and warm, I knew this was different. The air between us crackled with electricity I couldn't name, couldn't understand. My hands stilled in the soapy water, and for a moment, neither of us moved. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel beneath silk. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning I couldn't decipher. I forced myself to look at him, really look at him, and what I saw in his eyes made my knees weak. There was conflict there, a war between desire and restraint, between what he wanted to say and what he thought he should keep hidden. His jaw clenched and unclenched, a muscle twitching beneath the stubble that darkened his cheek. In that moment, he looked older than his years, carrying a weight that seemed too heavy for someone so young. "Marcus," I whispered, not trusting my voice to remain steady. "What is it?" He reached past me to turn off the faucet, his arm brushing mine in a touch so light it might have been accidental. But the heat that flared where our skin met was anything but accidental. I watched, mesmerized, as water droplets fell from the tap in slow motion, each one catching the light before disappearing into the drain. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire, vibrating with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. I could hear his breathing, slightly uneven, matching the erratic rhythm of my own. The kitchen clock ticked louder now, marking seconds that felt like hours. "I've been trying to ignore it," he finally said, his eyes never leaving mine. "Trying to pretend it's not there. But I can't anymore, Grace. I can't." My name on his lips again, soft and desperate. The dish towel slipped from my fingers, landing silently on the floor. Neither of us moved to pick it up. The space between us seemed to shrink without either of us stepping closer, as if the very air was conspiring to bring us together. "What can't you ignore?" The question escaped before I could stop it, my voice barely above a whisper. Part of me already knew the answer, had known it for weeks in the way his gaze lingered when he thought I wasn't looking, in the way conversation died when we accidentally touched in the narrow hallway. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of frustration that made him look boyish despite the intensity in his eyes. "This," he said simply, gesturing to the space between us. "Whatever this is. The way I feel when you're near. The way everything else fades when you walk into a room." My heart thundered against my ribs, a wild thing trying to escape its cage. This couldn't be happening. I was his landlady, older by more than a decade, responsible for maintaining professional boundaries. But standing there in my kitchen, with the warm light casting golden shadows across his face, Those boundaries felt as fragile as spider silk. "Marcus, we can't," I started, but he shook his head, cutting me off. "I know we shouldn't." "God, I know. I've told myself 1,000 times. But knowing doesn't change how I feel." His voice cracked slightly, revealing the vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. "Do you have any idea what it's like? Living here, seeing you every day, wanting to say something but knowing I shouldn't." The raw honesty in his words struck me like a physical blow. My carefully constructed walls began to crumble, brick by brick. How long had I been pretending not to notice? How many times had I caught myself watching him from the kitchen window as he worked on his laptop in the garden? How often had I lingered in the hallway, hoping for an accidental encounter? "Yes," I whispered, the admission torn from somewhere deep inside. "I know exactly what it's like." The confession hung between us, changing everything and nothing all at once. Marcus's eyes widened slightly, hope and disbelief warring in their depths. He took a half-step closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "Grace," he breathed, and this time my name was a prayer, a question, a plea all rolled into one. His hand rose slowly, hesitantly, stopping just short of my cheek. I could feel the warmth of his palm hovering there, not quite touching, the almost contact more intimate than any touch I'd experienced in years. Time seemed to stop. The kitchen faded away, leaving just the two of us suspended in this moment of possibility. I was acutely aware of every sensation: the cool tile beneath my bare feet, the lingering scent of dish soap on my hands, the way my breath caught in my throat as his thumb finally, barely, grazed my cheekbone. The touch was featherlight, barely there, but it sent electricity coursing through my veins. My eyes fluttered closed of their own accord, and I heard his sharp intake of breath. When I opened them again, his face was closer, his intentions clear in the way his gaze dropped to my lips. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his breath warm against my skin. "Tell me this is wrong." But I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, my hand rising to cover his where it cradled my face. His skin was warm, slightly rough, and the simple contact made my whole body hum with awareness. "I can't," I managed, my voice trembling. "I've tried, Marcus. God knows I've tried." Something shifted in his expression then: relief, desire, and something deeper, more profound. His other hand found my waist, settling there with a possessiveness that should have alarmed me but instead felt like coming home. The thin fabric of my blouse offered no barrier to the heat of his palm, and I shivered despite the warmth of the kitchen. "Then don't," he said simply, and the words held such certainty, such conviction, that my last reservations began to dissolve. "Don't try anymore." The space between us disappeared entirely as he drew me closer, our bodies aligning with a rightness that defied logic. I could feel his heart beating against my chest, fast and strong, matching the frantic rhythm of my own. His forehead touched mine, and we stayed like that, breathing the same air, teetering on the edge of something irreversible. "What happens now?" I asked, my hands finding their way to his shoulders, feeling the tension coiled in his muscles. "Now," he murmured, his lips barely brushing mine as he spoke, "we stop pretending." The kiss, when it came, was soft as a whisper, tentative and questioning. His lips moved against mine with a gentleness that brought tears to my eyes, as if he was afraid I might shatter at any moment. My hands slid up to tangle in his hair, pulling him closer, deeper, letting him know without words that I wouldn't break. The kiss deepened, became something more urgent, more desperate. Years of loneliness, months of suppressed desire, weeks of stolen glances, all of it poured into this moment. His arms wrapped around me, lifting me slightly off my feet, and I melted against him, every curve of my body fitting perfectly against his. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the kitchen seemed different somehow. The familiar space had been transformed by what had passed between us, charged with an energy that made the air shimmer. Marcus's eyes were dark, pupils dilated, and the look he gave me was pure hunger tempered by tenderness. "I've wanted to do that since the day I moved in," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. His thumb traced my lower lip, still swollen from our kiss, and I caught it between my teeth, watching his eyes darken further at the gesture. "Why didn't you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The same reasons that had kept me silent: propriety, fear, the weight of societal expectations. "Because I was afraid," he admitted, his honesty disarming. "Afraid you'd ask me to leave. Afraid of ruining whatever this was between us. But mostly afraid that once I started, I'd never be able to stop." His words sent a thrill through me, dangerous and delicious. I understood that fear, felt it even now as we stood wrapped in each other's arms. This wasn't just attraction, wasn't just loneliness seeking comfort. This was something deeper, more consuming, something that could burn us both if we weren't careful. "And now?" I prompted, my fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Now, I'm more afraid of never knowing," he said simply. "Of spending my life wondering what could have been." The raw vulnerability in his voice undid me completely. I pulled his head down for another kiss, this one slower, deeper, a thorough exploration that left us both trembling. His hands mapped the curve of my spine, learning the geography of my body through the thin barrier of clothing, each touch reverent and hungry at once. When his lips found the sensitive spot just below my ear, I gasped, my head falling back to give him better access. He took full advantage, trailing kisses down the column of my throat, each one leaving a trail of fire in its wake. My hands clutched at his shoulders, needing the anchor as waves of sensation threatened to sweep me away. "Grace," he murmured against my skin, my name a benediction on his lips. "Beautiful Grace." The endearment, spoken with such reverence, brought tears to my eyes. When was the last time someone had called me beautiful? When was the last time I'd felt desired, cherished, seen? Marcus pulled back, concern flooding his features when he saw the moisture on my cheeks. He started, but I silenced him with a finger to his lips. "Happy tears," I assured him, though the words came out shaky. "It's just been so long since anyone." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something fierce and protective. He cupped my face in both hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "Then they were fools," he said with quiet conviction. "All of them." The sincerity in his voice, the absolute certainty, made my heart constrict. I turned my face into his palm, pressing a kiss to the center, feeling him shudder at the simple gesture. The kitchen had grown darker as evening deepened into night, the golden light now more amber, casting us in a warm glow that felt like a blessing. "We should talk about this," I said, though every fiber of my being protested the idea of stepping back, of letting reality intrude on this perfect moment. Marcus nodded, though he made no move to release me. "Tomorrow," he agreed. "We'll talk tomorrow. Figure out what this means, where we go from here. And tonight?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, laden with possibilities that made my pulse race. His eyes darkened, and the look he gave me was pure heat. "Tonight, we just be. No thinking, no analyzing. Just this." He sealed the promise with another kiss, this one different from the others. Where before had been exploration and hunger, this was comfort and connection. His lips moved against mine with a sweetness that made my chest ache, as if he was trying to communicate everything he couldn't put into words. The kiss ended naturally, melting into an embrace that felt like harbor after a storm. I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady thrum of his heartbeat, feeling his chin settle on top of my head. We stood like that for long minutes, the kitchen clock ticking away seconds that no longer seemed to matter. "I should let you finish the dishes," he said eventually, though his arms tightened around me even as he spoke. I laughed softly, the sound muffled against his shirt. "They can wait." "Good," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the crown of my head. "Because I'm not ready to let you go yet." The admission sent warmth flooding through me. I tilted my head back to look at him, struck anew by how handsome he was in the soft light. Not just physically, though the strong jaw and dark eyes certainly didn't hurt, but in the way he looked at me, as if I was something precious, something worth cherishing. "Then don't," I echoed his earlier words, watching his lips curve into a smile that made my knees weak. He didn't. Instead, he took my hand and led me to the living room, settling us both on the couch. I curled into his side, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me, holding me close. It felt natural, right, as if we'd been doing this for years instead of minutes. The house settled around us. Familiar creaks and sighs that usually emphasized my solitude now seemed to celebrate this new togetherness. Marcus's fingers traced idle patterns on my arm, each touch sending little sparks of electricity through my skin. I could feel the rise and fall of his chest beneath my cheek, steady and reassuring. "Tell me something," I said after a while, breaking the comfortable silence. "When did you know?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "The day I came to look at the room," he finally said. "You were wearing that blue dress, the one with the little flowers. You had flour on your cheek from baking and when you smiled." I knew I was in trouble. The memory made me smile. I remembered that day, how nervous I'd been about renting to someone so young, so attractive. How I tried to maintain professional distance even as something about him drew me in. "I tried to talk myself out of taking the room," he continued, his voice soft in the darkness. "Told myself it would be too complicated, too difficult. But I couldn't stay away." "I'm glad you didn't," I admitted, tracing the buttons of his shirt with one finger. "Though God knows I tried to keep things professional." His chest rumbled with quiet laughter. "You did better than I did. Do you know how many cold showers I've taken in the past 6 months?" The thought of him wanting me, struggling with the same desires that had plagued me, sent heat pooling low in my belly. I shifted slightly, pressing closer, and heard his breath catch. "Grace," he warned, his voice strained. "If you keep doing that." "What?" I asked innocently, though the effect was somewhat ruined by the breathlessness in my voice. I shifted again, more deliberately this time, and was rewarded with a low groan. His hand tightened on my arm, not painful but definitely possessive. The knowledge that I could affect him this way, that I held this power over him, was intoxicating. "You're playing with fire," he murmured, turning his head to nip lightly at my ear. The sensation shot straight through me, making me gasp. "Maybe I want to burn," I whispered back, surprising myself with my boldness. He pulled back enough to look at me, his eyes black in the dim light. What he saw in my face must have convinced him I was serious, because the next thing I knew, I was in his lap, straddling his thighs, his hands gripping my hips with barely restrained hunger. "You have no idea what you do to me," he said roughly, his hands sliding up my sides, thumbs brushing the undersides of my breasts through my blouse. The light touch was enough to make me arch into him, seeking more contact. "Show me," I challenged, my hands framing his face, thumbs stroking his cheekbones. He did. The kiss was different this time, deeper, more demanding. His tongue swept into my mouth, claiming and exploring, while his hands mapped every curve they could reach. I met him passion for passion, years of pent-up desire finally finding an outlet. When we broke apart, both panting, I could feel the evidence of his arousal pressing against me. The knowledge sent a fresh wave of heat through my body, making me shift restlessly in his lap. His hands tightened on my hips, holding me still. "Grace," he ground out, his forehead resting against mine. "We should slow down. I don't want you to regret." I silenced him with another kiss, pouring all my certainty into it. When I pulled back, I made sure he could see the truth in my eyes. "The only thing I'd regret is stopping now." Something shifted in his expression, the last of his restraint crumbling away. With a fluid movement that spoke of hidden strength, he stood, lifting me with him. I wrapped my legs around his waist instinctively, my arms around his neck, trusting him completely. "Your room or mine?" he asked, his voice rough with desire. "Yours," I decided quickly. My room still held too many memories of lonely nights and empty dreams. His room was neutral territory, a place where we could write our own story. He carried me down the hallway, navigating the familiar path in the dark. Each step brought us closer to a line we couldn't uncross, but I felt no hesitation, no doubt. only anticipation thrumming through my veins like wine. His room was dimly lit by moonlight filtering through the curtains. He set me down gently beside the bed, his hands lingering on my waist as if reluctant to let go. We stood there for a moment, the gravity of what we were about to do settling over us like a blanket. "Are you sure?" he asked one more time, his thumb stroking my cheek with infinite tenderness. Instead of answering with words, I reached for the buttons of my blouse, holding his gaze as I slowly undid each one. His eyes followed the movement of my fingers, darkening with each new inch of skin revealed. When the last button fell open, he sucked in a sharp breath. "Beautiful," he murmured, his hands replacing mine, sliding the fabric off my shoulders with reverent care. "So beautiful." The blouse pulled at our feet, forgotten as his hands skimmed up my arms, across my shoulders, down my back. Each touch was electric, leaving trails of fire in its wake. I reached for his shirt in turn, needing to feel his skin against mine. He helped me, yanking the shirt over his head with less patience than he'd shown with my clothes. The moonlight painted his chest in silver and shadow, highlighting the lean muscles I'd only imagined before. I placed my palms flat against his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath my touch. "You're shaking," he observed, covering my hands with his. Not from fear, I assured him, and it was true. The tremors running through me were pure anticipation, pure need. He smiled then, a slow, predatory curve of lips that made my insides melt. "Good," he said, walking me backward until my knees hit the bed. "Because I plan to make you shake a lot more before the night is over." The promise in his words sent heat flooding through me. I sank onto the bed, looking up at him through my lashes, watching as he took in the sight of me half-dressed in his room, on his bed. The possessive gleam in his eyes made me feel powerful, desired, alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. He knelt before me, his hands sliding up my thighs, his touch both soothing and inflaming. "Tell me what you want, Grace," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the inside of my knee. "Tell me how to make you feel good." The request was my undoing. Here was this beautiful young man, offering himself to me, putting my pleasure first. Tears pricked at my eyes again, but this time I didn't try to hide them. He saw, understood, and rose up to kiss them away, each gentle press of lips a promise, a vow. "Just you," I whispered against his mouth. "I just want you." He made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a groan, and then we were falling back onto the bed together, a tangle of limbs and desperate kisses. His weight settled over me, perfect and right, and I arched up into him, needing more contact, more skin, more everything. The rest of our clothes disappeared in a haze of hungry touches and breathless laughter. When finally there was nothing between us but moonlight and desire, we both stilled, the moment too profound for words. His eyes met mine, asking one last silent question, and I answered by pulling him down for a kiss that left no room for doubt. What followed was a symphony of sensation, soft gasps and quiet moans, the slide of skin against skin, the perfect rhythm of two bodies learning each other's secrets. He touched me like I was something precious, something sacred, even as passion drove us both higher. I gave myself over to the feeling, to him, letting go of years of loneliness and doubt. When release finally claimed us both, it was with his name on my lips and mine on his, a mutual surrender that felt like coming home. We lay tangled together afterward, sweat cooling on our skin, hearts slowly returning to normal rhythm. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my back while I pressed kisses to his chest, neither of us willing to break the spell. "Stay," he murmured when I shifted slightly, his arms tightening around me. "Always," I promised, meaning it more than I'd ever meant anything in my life. We drifted off like that, wrapped in each other and the quiet certainty that everything had changed. Tomorrow would bring questions, complications, the need to navigate this new reality we'd created. But tonight was ours, perfect and complete. I woke once in the night to find him watching me, his expression soft with something that looked dangerously like love. He smiled when he saw my eyes open, pulling me closer, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "No regrets?" he whispered into the darkness. None, I whispered back, sealing the promise with a kiss. And there, in the quiet hours between night and dawn, I knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't just a moment of weakness or a temporary madness. This was the beginning of something real, something worth fighting for. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought, we would face them together. The last thing I remembered before sleep claimed me again was the steady beat of his heart beneath my ear and the gentle stroke of his hand in my hair, a lullaby more beautiful than any song. In his arms, I had found not just passion but peace, not just desire but belonging. Home, I realized, wasn't just a place. Sometimes it was a person. And I had finally found mine. When morning light crept through the curtains, painting everything in shades of gold and rose, I opened my eyes to find Marcus already awake, propped on one elbow, studying my face with an expression of such tenderness it made my heart skip. "Good morning," he said softly, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. "Morning," I replied, suddenly shy despite everything we'd shared. The daylight brought with it a touch of reality, questions about what happened next crowding into my mind. As if sensing my thoughts, he leaned down to kiss me, slow and sweet and full of promise. When he pulled back, his eyes were serious but warm. "Whatever you're thinking, whatever doubts you're having, we'll work through them," he said firmly. "This isn't just one night for me, Grace. This is everything." The simple declaration, spoken with such conviction, swept away my fears like morning mist. I reached up to cup his face, marveling at how right this felt, how natural. "For me too," I admitted, watching relief and joy transform his features. We sealed the promise with another kiss, longer this time, deeper. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, he grinned, boyish and beautiful in the morning light. "So," he said, eyes twinkling with mischief, "about that breakfast you're always making, think you could teach me your secret recipe for those pancakes?" I laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep inside, full of happiness and hope. "Only if you promise to help with the dishes afterward." "Deal," he agreed readily, stealing another quick kiss before rolling out of bed. As I watched him pull on his jeans, sunlight playing across his back, I felt a surge of contentment so strong it almost overwhelmed me. This was real. This was happening. And for the first time in years, the future looked bright with possibility. "Grace." He turned back, catching me staring. His smile softened into something intimate, just for me. "Yes, thank you," he said simply. "For taking a chance. For letting me in." My throat tightened with emotion. "Thank you for being brave enough to say something. For not letting us waste more time." He crossed back to the bed, framing my face with his hands, kissing me with a thoroughness that made my toes curl. "No more wasted time," he promised against my lips. "From now on, every moment counts." And there, in his childhood room turned sanctuary, with morning light blessing our new beginning, I knew he was right. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles we might face, we would meet them together. Because some things were worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. Love, I was learning, was one of those things. And in Marcus's arms, I had found not just love but redemption, not just passion but purpose. The future stretched before us, uncertain but full of promise, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I was eager to meet it. Hand in hand, heart to heart, we stepped into our new story, one written not in the stars, but in the quiet moments between heartbeats, in whispered confessions and gentle touches, in the courage to reach across the divide and claim the happiness we both deserved. And if that wasn't worth celebrating with pancakes, I didn't know what was.